Hello everyone, and welcome to It's Your Season Life, where we are discovering and living life at any age. I'm Lisa Boson. I'm here to introduce you to people like you and me who have rediscovered themselves, stretched their abilities, and to me, kept their light under a bushel basket. I hear their stories and think, wow, that is so cool. These are ordinary people doing the extraordinary. So what are we doing? Well, you know how you'd love to hear your peers succeed? Get inspired by those who just try? That's us. That's It's Your Season Life. Don't forget to follow us on our website, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. I'm there sharing weekly updates and, of course, what's in season, be it people, food, feelings, and nature. So let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to today's It's Your Season Life podcast. It is Thursday, February 11th, and our guest is Carrie Tempalski, owner of Source Points Community Acupuncture in Fort Collins, Colorado. Carrie has a master's degree in traditional Chinese medicine and is recognized as Diplomate of Acupuncture by the National Certification Commission for Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine. She has over 28 years in the healthcare field, and yes, we're going to hear all about that, and expanded her skills and mastery of acupuncture under Dr. Mikio Sankey, and is an approved Esoteric Acupuncture Practitioner. In her spare time, if she has any, I'm really concerned about that, she also studied Taoist philosophies, Gong, and is certified external Qi healer, as well as a meditation instructor using Western meditation techniques, as well as techniques from others' philosophy. So help me welcome Carrie Tempalski today. Thanks so much for joining us, Carrie.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Lisa. I appreciate it. It's nice to chat with you today.
Oh, I'm so excited. I think our audience is going to be excited too. So one thing you mentioned in your bio on the website is importance of meditation and movement and the love of the outdoors as essential to your continued well-being and growth and to being the best practitioner you can be. But I really want to know, how did all this come into being? So let's just get started there. How did this happen?
How did this happen? That's a good question. I sometimes ask myself the same thing. So my first career was actually, I worked in Western medicine. I actually started at the age of 21 working in the emergency department. I became an EMT technician and worked in the ER, and then went on to nursing school. And it wasn't until I had graduated from nursing school, I started having some of my own physical problems, basically some back issues that were causing me some difficulty, and that was actually how I got introduced to the concept of acupuncture. I was having treatments myself, and working in Western medicine, it's a very physical job. Working in the emergency department is a very physical job, and it's also very psychologically stressful, as I'm sure you can imagine. So, during the era of my late 20s, I started developing those physical concerns and worked with an acupuncturist to kind of help me get through them after the components of Western medicine I was using weren't really helping. So I was introduced to chiropractic and acupuncture, and found it to be actually quite life-changing, because I originally had gone, of course, for that pain, that physical body pain, but what I had discovered along the way was that it kind of created an opening for me into a little bit higher spiritual self. I know that sounds a little bit unusual, but I did have some pretty profound things happen in terms of my awareness of the true connection between the mind and the body and the spirit. I would have these acupuncture sessions and leave feeling lighter and clearer, and it kind of created a spiritual unfolding for me at the same time. I started to study different philosophies, not necessarily a religious perspective, but Buddhism was a place that I found some interesting knowledge, because it opened my eyes to the idea of holism or holistic thinking. And I went from that time of my life into recognizing that I wasn't necessarily fully satisfied working in corporate America. I worked for an organization that had been bought out by a very large company, and it was taking the humanness out of my job for me. So I had a very, profound transition. I was about in my mid-30s, I guess, or close to my mid-30s. And I don't know, I woke up one day and realized that my path needed to take a very sharp turn, and I embarked on acupuncture school. And so I guess at the age of 34, that was where my career, I continued to work in the emergency department, and I was in a managerial role. I was working on departmental design committees. I was doing all kinds of really interesting things, but I knew that this connected more with who I really was, and that was my jumping off point to where acupuncture school started, and off I went. So that's kind of how it all began.
Oh, that's an amazing story of pivoting and kind of really listening to yourself. Where did you go from there? Were you private? Had Source Point started?
Yeah, I mean, school was a long journey, and it took me about 4 years of acupuncture school itself to get my master's degree. And during the time of going to school, my current business partner, Elizabeth, she and I had worked together in the emergency room, and we had a moment one day at work, and we're chatting about what's going on in your future, what are you up to, and we realized at that time that we both were starting acupuncture school, and neither one of us had any idea. So we commuted together for almost the bulk of our entire school career and became each other's right and left hand ladies, which was really cool. Because we grew a lot during that time, and we had some similar experiences during school. And one of the things that was really profound at the end of our school career was that we interned at a community acupuncture clinic down in Denver. And community acupuncture at the time was very new. Community acupuncture started in Portland, Oregon. It was a idea that was started by two women up there. And the name of their community acupuncture was called working class acupuncture. And the idea was to take acupuncture out of this kind of, spa-like setting that a lot of people were experiencing. It was very expensive and kind of exclusive. And they wanted to bring it to the masses. And that was one of the things that we fell in love with, was this idea that we could kind of embody this idea of bringing this medicine to everyone, making it available to anybody regardless of their financial need or, ability to pay, if you will. And that was what kind of got Source Point Community Acupuncture started, and that's been our business since we opened in 2009.
So I want to delve a little bit deeper into acupuncture and the concept of community acupuncture. Mm-hmm. So kind of two questions, but I'll break it into two. What are some misconceptions of acupuncture, and what really is acupuncture?
Well, acupuncture, one of the biggest misconceptions is that it is not real medicine. And after being in practice for as long as I have, there's this idea, there's something called sham acupuncture, that people have used that term in the past. And basically what they're saying is that people go into this relaxing setting and they feel like there's a placebo effect that kind of causes this person to work through their healing process. And, after years of doing this, and also doing some, of my own research into the historical sense of what acupuncture really is, there have been forms of acupuncture culturally in many diverse parts of the world over thousands and thousands of years. So, acupuncture is attributed to the Chinese, but the Chinese were the first to really document the use of acupuncture in their medical system, if you will. But it does date back to ancient Egypt, ancient India, different places like that. And what it is it's an overall system. The body has its physical component, but as we all know, there's these terms floating around in our culture these days, things like the word chi or prana, and that is basically what we could define as life force energy. Acupuncture works with that energy. There's also, from the Western perspective, some really unique ways of explaining acupuncture. It's very, kind of complicated to someone who maybe isn't real versed in pathophysiology, but they think it works on a cellular level at a place called the telomere, which is a connection between two cells, if you will. And there's a lot of studying around acupuncture these days, not to get too technical about it, but basically, we don't have a full definition of how acupuncture works, but we know that it works based on thousands of years of anecdotal studies, and it's a really unique system.
It is very unique, and I can understand why people might think that it's a placebo effect, because it absolutely is extremely. For when I receive it, I go someplace and I come back extraordinarily refreshed. And the telomere piece is interesting because there's a lot of work right now being done with antioxidants and telomeres. So
Right.
more for our audience to digest. But I think that begs to another question, which is not the original question I was going to ask you next. But but we think about you started with acupuncture with your own back pain, and then but what other types of diagnoses or illnesses do you treat for particularly?
Yeah, I mean, acupuncture, and honestly, just not just acupuncture on its own. There are other things besides acupuncture that a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner does. There's obviously, things like herbal medicine and other modalities like cupping and different things like that we'll utilize. So, the things we generally see the most often are pain, because that's what it is most commonly used for in our culture, is pain-related syndromes. So anything from, elbow pain, back pain, headaches. I will often treat patients for, post-traumatic injuries like ankle sprains, post-surgery. A variety of pain-related problems are definitely a huge percentage of what most acupuncture practices see. My personal practice, we see a lot of that kind of problem, but we also will work with digestive problems. We work headaches, also, viral and bacterial problems such as viruses, colds, flus, stomach problems related to, the ingestion of a toxin, like food poisoning, for example, is something that we can work to help someone feel better from. We do preventative medicine for the immune system. We really look at the body as a whole being. So in my own practice, I work with a lot of people on their psychological and emotional health. So anxiety has been something that has been very profound, especially in the last year. Depression, again, another thing that we don't really think of as being something you would go to an acupuncturist for, but in my personal practice and in our clinic, those are some of the very top things we work with, are people and their emotions, grief, different things like that.
I just think of those things as kind of also being not the telomere level, but a life force issue as well. Those things,
For sure.
Certainly do impact that. So tell us a little bit, community acupuncture mean? What is that design? What is that healthcare
Sure.
philosophy?
So the model that we were introduced to, we've actually we've kind of created our own version of the same thing. Community acupuncture, again, I think I mentioned in the intro, the idea is that you want to make this medicine accessible to anyone who feels they need support, regardless of their ability to pay. You want to make it available to anyone who comes to your clinic and wants help. It's basically designed with the idea that you would see more patients more frequently during a clinic day. So if you run a private practice, you may see 2 patients an hour, for example. In our practice, we tend, of course, I have to speak to the after COVID times because this is what we're doing right now, but we see 3 patients an hour. In the past, we had everyone in a big open treatment space. It was a large room, beautiful skylights, fireplace, kind of segregated little areas with screens and different things. So you had some level of privacy, but at this point, we've separated everything out into private spaces. So we have private rooms, and we still use that large room, but not for as many patients. So we've had to pivot again a little bit with COVID. It's created a bit of an interesting scenario for us, honestly. But the idea is that you see more people per day, and because of that, you're able to charge a smaller fee for your sessions. So everything we do is based on a sliding scale. That sliding scale was created with the intention that we're always going to see people who have a greater ability to pay. They'll have a more of a financial means to pay the higher end of our sliding scale. And then that way, if we have folks who come in and they just really are having some kind of financial problem or concern, they can afford to come in and pay less. And it's what we call pay it forward. Because with that setup, I honestly have never had to turn anyone away. There are people who do pay a little bit below the bottom end of our scale just because that's what they agree to with us. We make individual concessions when needed. And I do have people who make a larger donation at times to be able to support that. So after all of these years, we've managed to do a really good job of, keeping true to that. Even during COVID, we did have to make a couple small adjustments, but honestly, it's been really amazing. So because we see more and more patients, on a given day, I probably treat between 20 and 25 patients on average.
Wow.
Whereas in a private practice, you may see, 7, 8, 10, depends on how often, how much you work. But
So something that speaks to me about that model, though, is that are they patients or customers, clients? How do you define their patients?
I mean, we call them patients. You can use the term client if you choose.
So as a patient coming in, there's just this not expectation, but because I don't think it's asked, but a bit just being respectful of others because of the environment. There's kind of this mutual kind of co-respect that, you're sharing a space, but you're also sharing of yourself. And I think that's a very, I'm at a loss for words. I might have to edit this out, but it makes me feel warm and fuzzy anyway to know that, you're coming into a space where everyone is appreciative and recognizes we're all coming in at equal footing for whatever reason patients are there, but to be respectful of that financially and then also just within the space itself.
Right. It creates a really interesting environment of what we kind of use the words collective healing. We don't always recognize that when you walk into a room full of people, you kind of pick up on the energy that's all around you. And, some people would call that empathy or being an empath. And I think it's just really about, you kind of read the room and you see how it feels and you either take something from it or you kind of close yourself down so that you don't feel it. And we try to create a warm, comfortable environment for people so that they feel that collective energy of like, hey, all of these people are here doing the same thing. And it offers a lot of comfort. honestly. People really like it. It's been really great to watch the community that has been built out of Source Point. Originally, we thought, it was all about the acupuncture, but over the years, that's definitely not what we've seen. It's not just about the acupuncture. The acupuncture almost seems secondary a little bit at this point.
So is there a favorite patient story, or there's one that's there's always this kind of, as you worked in healthcare forever, there's always this one story that just kind of sticks with you. Do you have a patient story like that it can go either way.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if there's just one story, because I feel this incredible respect, and, I've been gifted the brilliance of being able to work with people, and those people have taught me. They are my greatest teachers. So every moment I have with someone, I try to embody what they've taught me. And sometimes it's devastatingly painful. I've cried with patients many a time before because of something going on in their life. And I think I would probably bring it back to the moments, and I've had a lot of these in the last year, because this year has really brought up a lot for different people. And I think one of my favorite stories of the last year has been this gentleman he's in his 40s, and his body was kind of giving him a hard time. He was having some issues with some back pain, and before COVID happened, it caused him to have to leave his job. He has a pretty, well-paying job. He's the person who's the breadwinner for his home, and they were definitely living the American dream. And what ended up happening is he had to go on this leave of absence from the job, and he realized, as he was going through this horrendous problem with his physical body, is that it was kind of a wake-up call for him to get his life in order. He realized that he was massively overextended in his financial world. He wasn't doing any good self-care at all, and he kind of came back, to reality during having some acupuncture treatments, where we would sit and talk about, maybe this is more about you awakening to what you want the rest of your life to look like. And after having several conversations with him, this guy has just, it's unbelievable what he's accomplished. He's sold houses that were overextending him, and personal belongings. And he's taken up a meditation practice, a yoga practice. His back is better, and he's back to work, but he's put new limits in on what he's doing. And it's pretty great to, sit and talk to this guy when he walks in and say, I don't even recognize you as the same man that came here, 6 or 8 months ago. So there's moments like that you watch, just being able to offer support and give somebody a little bit of attention to their physical body and help them get recentered, and they start to soar. And I have stories like that we could talk literally for the rest of the afternoon about, because it does. It happens in my job every day. So that's pretty beautiful. And I think that's the gift of what I'm able to do with people, is I get as much from you, my people that I work with, as I do, from my own education and learning. And I think I try to give as much as I get, I hope.
So I'm going to have two branches. We're going to go with this idea of self-care, because it's out there. It's in every magazine you read. And, there's just so much about self-care. And then you offer a lot to all of us to help improve our self-care. And I want to kind of go down this laundry list of things that you have in your toolkit. But let's talk a little bit about the importance of self-care to start, if you don't mind.
Sure. Self-care, has become a very popular kind of trendy word. And I remember at the beginning of, last year talking with this friend of mine, and she gave me a term that I'm going to give Sandy some credit right now. She said the words to me, self first. And we had a discussion about that, and what self first and self-care really mean to me is that if I am conscious and aware of the things that I'm doing for me, meaning the food I eat, the water I drink, what I choose to listen to on, the radio, the television, social media, the type of podcasts I'm interested in, and things like that, then I am more able to be better outside of my little world, when I go out and I'm with other people, when you're with friends, family, that kind of thing. If you put yourself first and you take good care of who you are as a person, then everything is a lot easier on the outside. You take moments to really think about what it is as an individual, what Lisa or what Carrie would want to have, to really be the best version of ourselves that we can. So that's what I think self-care is about. I think it comes in lots of different modalities, and what I'm realizing is that we all are kind of finding our niche with that. For some people, it's things like massage and acupuncture, meditation, but it also comes down to our food choices. It's going to be better for us to really be conscious of that versus just grabbing whatever, is available to us on the quick fix kind of mode. And I think we've all slowed down a lot, or not everyone, but a lot of us have slowed down a lot this year in the way we operate. And I think it's letting us look at what the self really wants. So that's what I think self-care is about really thinking about me as an individual and what I really choose versus what's trendy or popular,
Yeah, there's another piece to it, and maybe there's a good Taoist philosophy out there on this. I don't know, because the whole piece of, is it selfish to put self first? And there's such a maybe not religious, but there's this. How do you? For me, it's always how to deal with, is it selfish to be self first? That's probably the big question for the day. But I love the concept of self first, and how to shake off that selfish piece of it. Is it
right?
Yeah.
I think that's a very, that was really the conversation that prompted me to use this as a bit of a mantra this year, is how do we change our philosophy around what is selfish and what is self first, right? Like, for example, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's selfish if you're taking care of yourself by choosing filtered water over tap water, right? Like, it's just a healthy, conscious decision. So if you kind of look at everything that way, it doesn't mean I'm taking anything away from what I would do or how giving I could be to someone else. It just means that I am taking better care of me so that I'm better able to do those things for other people. We all get burned out and tired and exhausted, and because we're always giving and we're always doing. And how do we get away from the giving and doing mode and get back to a little bit of self-preservation so that there's more of me to go around? And that's why people seek healing. That's why they seek acupuncture and psychotherapy and all of those different things, is because they want to feel better. And if we just pull the reins back a little bit and say, hey, I'm willing to give myself as much attention as I do all of these other places where I've been expending energy, I think that's really not selfish at all. I think that means that you're truly taking care of you as a human. We have this human body and we can wear it out really easily by giving way too much.
So I love that idea of thinking of what we're doing with ourselves, like filtered water versus regular water. We're not taking away, we're not keeping anyone else from having water, but we're keeping ourselves healthier so we can be a better self for others.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
So let's pivot for just a moment, because I don't want to forget, you have so many other things in your toolkit. So tell us, just start somewhere maybe. What is an external chi healer?
So I think Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've studied a lot of things over the years. I've gotten, varied interests just at different times in my life because of my own path, my own healing journey, my own, spiritual growth moments, whatever you want to call them. And so I kind of have to say that I've done a lot of different things, and I don't necessarily do them all the time, but they've helped me kind of evolve and create my own practice. And so I think external chi healing, that is something that I spent about a year studying with a gentleman who's a Taoist priest. He came from China, and he teaches, a whole series of different things like Qigong and Tai Chi training. And the external chi healing, the closest thing I could probably relate it to that you might have heard of is called Reiki.
Yes.
Reiki and different types of energy work are something that's really, become very popular in our culture now. And each of those has a lot of similarities. And that's what external chi healing is it's like a type of external energy work. It's during the training, you learn various ways of cultivating your own energy or your own chi, which chi is basically the same thing as, I guess, life force is the easiest way to describe it. We're all born with chi, and we all do things that nourish our chi, such as eating food, drinking water. The cleaner and healthier of a lifestyle we live, the more we're able to conserve that chi. The more destructive things we do to our bodies, like staying up too long, working too hard, things like that will deplete chi. So when our chi runs out, we do too, is the easiest way to put it. And the external chi healer is just someone who helps the client or the patient that they're working with by using different techniques to help. It's a more of a non-physical touch kind of energy healing. So I do that occasionally with some people, and I also have some Reiki training, so I do that as well.
So where does I want to talk about you for a moment. So how do
Sure.
how do you recharge or re-chi or whatever you want to call it?
Re-chi. How do I re-chi? That's a good question. So I have worked really hard over the last several years to get a really good balance in my life. I purposefully have never worked more than, if I can help it, 3 days a week. Even when I was in nursing, we worked 12-hour days, so we would only work 3 days a week. So I generally have, 3 to 4 days off per week where I have time for my own personal interests, things like hiking and being outdoors and walking the dog and paddleboarding or, vacations, whatever. Those things are always really important to me. But I think my day-to-day practice is probably the most important part of my, re-chiing. And we've just made a new word. I'm going to have to write that down. I love it. But, meditation is really important. I meditate every day at some point. It could be for 5 minutes. It could be just a walking meditation, like walking the dog can be a meditation. I try to be really conscious of the food that I eat. I eat pretty much organically grown foods as much as possible. I don't drink water that's not filtered unless I have to. I try to pay close attention to my diet. That's a really important part of my health and well-being. Of course, this last year, the carbohydrates have probably been a little bit more consistent, but overall, that's a good place for me to feel well. And, meditation, yoga, and physical activity. Mm-hmm. And then also just really good mind-body practices. So I have little tips and, things that I do for myself during the day because I do work with people. And a lot of times I work with people who are, suffering, and therefore I have to go through a process of just kind of letting some things go during the day, and that's where the meditation and mindfulness comes in, not carrying that load around with me. And so I have different types of let's see, I don't want to use the word psychotherapy because I don't really go to a psychotherapist, but I work with some different mind-body healers that help me with that part of my life.
I can see that. I had studied compassion fatigue for several years, and actually I took an online certification. It's really fascinating, and partly because healthcare workers do tend to, especially ones that work in your field, your current field and your previous, EMTs, people who are first responders, disaster relief, really suffer from compassion fatigue. I have two questions. You've mentioned filtered water twice, so I do want to ask about that. What's
it's a big deal.
What's up with the filtered water?
The big deal about the filtered water for me is that I started filtering water. We use a system called, I'm not getting paid to advertise for Berkey, but Berkey water filters, and they take the fluoride out of the water, and they take the chlorine out of the water. So when I drink water, I like out of the tap, I can smell the chlorine in it now because I'm so used to not having those chemicals in there. So that's why that's important to me, is that I just feel like water purification, water is a huge component of vitality. We all know what happens to us when we're even a little bit dehydrated, and we live in Colorado, so most of us are chronically dehydrated. And I think the water is life. We're 80% water, so that's why it's really important. And I feel the same way about food. You mentioned my teacher, Dr. Mikio Sankey, and he very much talks about the vibration of what we put in our body and how it creates a cleaner, more crystalline type person, right? If we eat healthier, if we drink healthier, we feel better, our minds work better, our bodies work better. So that's where that comes in.
Wow. Okay, awesome. I'm going to go do my research.
Aren't you glad you asked?
I am. I had to. What do I need to go research when we pop off this podcast? And then the other is meditation. And there's, I remember decades ago reading, is it Benson, Mindfulness? It didn't go over well in the 80s, but I think it's more in place now. But tell us a little bit what is the difference between just sitting and being quiet and really practicing meditation or mindfulness?
Sure. Meditation has gotten to be a very complex creature in the last, 15, 20 years, and especially in the United States. And I think we've always thought that meditation was associated a lot of times with Eastern religions. And so I think that's kind of where some of the aversions originally came from, is they thought you had to, go sit in a cave and not eat or drink and just think about nothing. And what I think meditation really is I think you can do meditation kind of in any format you choose. There's so many apps and different things now available that it makes it very interesting to learn how to just kind of center and let go of what goes on in your brain during the day. We all get very busy-headed and sometimes get really overwhelmed by, rapid thinking. One of the things my patients complain of the most is that they can't lay still because their brain is going all over the place. We call that monkey mind in our world.
Good to know.
You think of those monkeys just jumping from tree to tree, and that's what people's thoughts do. So the idea behind meditation is just really getting us out of that nervous system overload that happens in our lifestyle. Our lifestyle in the United States especially is kind of go, jumping from one thing to another. And it's just about recentering and giving yourself a moment to reset your thoughts. It doesn't mean that you have to sit on a meditation cushion and have an empty mind. It means that you need to just slow your thinking and wrap your head around what your day is going to look like. For example, my morning meditation always looks like me laying in bed, waking up, and thinking about a little bit of a plan for my day. And that's it. It's not complicated. And then sometimes I'll do, of course, there's all kinds of meditations that, meditations to support traveling out of your body and different, various different things, very complicated types of meditation. But just the most simple thing is mindfulness in our day-to-day. So being mindful and aware of the choices we make around food, where we go, what we watch, what we listen to. That's what I think mindfulness is. And I think meditation can be something as simple as just allowing yourself some time to, I don't know, sit outside and look up at the trees and listen to the leaves blow and not think about anything particularly,
Yeah, I think our culture is so ingrained, for our work culture particularly, that we have to be doing something. We have to be exceeding expectations. We've got to be 5-star, and
Yeah.
and there's not that, to take that time to just, it's kind of okay just to do nothing, and
Right.
and be doing nothing for a short period of time. But I think part of us is just kind of socially engaged to do that, and we have to switch that off. There were 2 words that came to mind when you were speaking, and that was being thoughtful and intentional. Like, what? I'm not picturing you laying in bed in the morning, but
I mean,
I think I did that this morning. Laying in the bed, going, just being thoughtful and intentional about how my day is going to be. And I wonder if there's another piece to that at night, being thoughtful and intentional about and thankful for the day that you had.
Absolutely. There's one of the things I did for a number of years. I had a good friend who taught me to have a gratitude practice, and I'm really not a good journaler, so I don't ever stick to that consistently. But she taught me to write at the end of the day, like, write one thing that you have gratitude for today. And sometimes I would end up with 7 pages, because you just really learn, we don't think about what we're grateful for on a day-to-day basis. And I think gratitude reminds us of all the beautiful, amazing things we have in our lives, whether it's, the gorgeous house plant that's growing right next to you, or the cell phone that you're listening to music on, or your loved one who's right there with you. And we all know how much that has been very vulnerable in the last year, for sure. So I think gratitude is the other greatest part of, meditation, is just sitting and thinking about, wow, look at how lucky I am to have all of these amazing things. And I have a job to get up to go do, and I love it, It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, you impact so many lives. I know you have mine, and I know you do others as well. We're going to be getting ready to wrap up in a little bit, so I really want you to just share maybe something we didn't. Is there something maybe we didn't talk about, or you want to emphasize a little bit more for the audience? Or
Sure. Well, I think, the big thing the theme that's coming through to me is just the overall ability for us to take a little bit of time as individuals to be aware of what it is that makes us feel better in this life. Things are very challenging and difficult for people, and I think, we've all had exposure to, people who are just struggling and having stress and anxiety, and we know that there's a lot of concern. And I think one of the things that we can do is support each other at the physical level and at the emotional level. That's probably the most important thing. And being an acupuncturist, one of the things that I would stress to people is that just taking some time for yourself, whether it's coming in for an acupuncture appointment, going to get a massage, finding people who can support you in your wellness journey, is really the most important thing for all of us right now. Because if we can feel happy and content and satisfied as people, then we can help some of the other people around us who are suffering and struggling right now. I think that's what I would pass through to people anyway.
Oh, that's wonderful. It kind of leads me to my next question. So if you're in northern Colorado, we can come visit your team at Source Point Acupuncture. But what would you suggest to others who, if they're what to look for in an acupuncturist?
Sure. There is a website called NCCAOM. Are you able to post a link to that?
Yes.
At the end? Okay. I'll get the proper name for you. But NCCAOM is our regulating agency in the United States. And the minimum requirement for an acupuncturist in the U.S. is a master's degree. And if you are listed on the NCCAOM website, that means you've actually passed the board certifications. So 2 things you want to look for are that NCCAOM referral, and also, like in Colorado, you have to have taken the board exams in order to be licensed in the state of Colorado, but not every state has that same requirement. I do think those are both really important, however, because it shows that you've taken the time to get the education to make you a well-rounded, holistic acupuncture practitioner.
Okay, well, I'll be sure and add that to the links on the podcast below on this episode. So, Carrie, I want to thank you for sharing your story today, sharing just everything, the interest of acupuncture, but also how important it is as well, and how many avenues we have to be able to stay healthy during this time and to really be the best selves we can be for ourselves. So thank you so much for joining me today.
You're most welcome. I really enjoyed it.
So that's a wrap for today. We've so enjoyed you being with us. I hope you learned something new, got some inspiration, and you are ready to move forward with your own new season. Remember, we are living life at any age. Take some time to visit the other social media sites, give us some feedback, shoot me an email on Facebook, and remember, until then, stay safe and keep on living. Cheers.